2022 was an era of rewriting history and breaking records in the women's game. Transfer fees and ludicrous numbers were no exception in that either. FIFA just released their 2022 annual transfers data that looked at every single transfer between January 1st up until December 31st of 2022. This year saw a new high of 119 associations around the globe be involved, including 1,555 recorded international transfers. This is almost a 19.3% increase than the previous record set in 2021. Almost 500 clubs around the world were involved, which is another 20% jump from 2021. These numbers are not shocking considering a lot of leagues did go professional within that period of time, as well as 2021 was still a year that was recovering from COVID, with a lot of tournaments, with a lot of games being rescheduled and kind of just reassembled and altered around. A lot of players weren't able to showcase their full potential, and striking a deal to transfer was probably not the year to do so in 2021. If we're able to look at this transfer activity from January to December, obviously the darker blue line is 2022, the lighter blue line is 2021. And peaks from both years are seen around the January-August window. That's when the summer and the winter windows open, so activity being peaked over there is not a surprise. What's super interesting is that because those numbers last year peaked in the windows, there's a significant decrease of transfers happening throughout the year or throughout the seasons compared to the years prior. If we're able to look at that kind of March to June time range, 2021 does beat the last year when it comes to transfers, and that's primarily because there's a very significant increase of signings happening in those actual transfer windows. Really nicely highlighted here is the transfer types of those players. And so we can see 85% of those players are out of contract transfers, but we are also starting to see permanent transfers with a transfer agreement between the two clubs have been becoming a lot more prevalent in recent years. Almost 42% of these players, so just over 1,300, didn't have a previous contract, which means previously they were either playing at an amateur level or they were still in the collegiate system and hadn't decided to go pro just yet. And this could be attributed to another reason with a lot of leagues going professional very, very recently. As you will see later, Spain had the most incomings and outgoings of these transfers. But also, if you remember, Liga F, their first ever fully professional league, launched just in 2021, 2022. So the correlation between going professional and having the most amount of ingoings and outgoings is not just out of nowhere. This incredibly impressive gross, there was an annual outlay of transfer fees in 2022 that was estimated to be around $3.3. Not only is this a new record, but it's 62% higher than 2022. That is such an impressive jump. There was an increase in both clubs demanding fees for their players, but also paying fees for those players that they were trying to buy. And as a result, both fixed fees went up as well as conditional fees with every single transfer. The dark blue line is clubs receiving transfer fees, and then the light blue is clubs spending on transfer fees, and you can see both of them gradually and parallelly went up together. Parallelly is probably not a word, but they're both moving up steadily together, which is exactly how you want the sport to be progressing. Spending, but also receiving backwards. That's how a cycle of money and generating revenue starts to take place when it comes to transfers. On top of that, 2022 also set the biggest transfer fee in the women's game, which was Kara Walsh, speculated to be over 400,000 euros. Obviously not fully disclosed, but it is set to believe as the biggest price tag in the women's game. FIFA has ranked the top 5 transfers by total transfer fee here. They are not put in order, but obviously Kara Walsh being up top is not a surprise. A big surprise here for some reason is that Benfica's logo is there instead of Rosenborg. I'm not sure how it could happen, but whoever FIFA intern did this is probably not having a great day today. Jokes aside, Manchester City being involved in 3 of the top 5 around the world is really telling to the board and kind of just the direction that club is heading. Black said they did get earlier on in the year. Sources do tell that it was almost 1,225 fee on her, but that hasn't been fully disclosed, but clearly it is a big cash in for her. Mary Fowler, a young 18-19-year-old from Australia, big talent, one of the biggest rising names in the game. I'm not sure if Manchester City has utilized her as well as they could be, but that is a completely separate narrative, and maybe we will start to see more minutes of her given the cup games and the fact that they're still in the Conti and the FA Cup. De Silva from Bordeaux over to Bayern Munich. Again, it's not disclosed what they spent on her, but whatever it is that they cashed in, she is worth every single penny of it because she has been an absolute rock for the German side. And then lastly, Jackie Groenen, obviously one of the most valued players that United had last season. If they wanted to sell her, they had to cash in big on her, and the fact that they were able to receive a significant amount of money from PSG means that the board is doing some good work when it comes to transfers and being aware that if they're selling some of their important players, they want to make sure they're getting the money back for that. The vast majority of players, almost 89%, do range between 18 to 29 years old. You're getting a little bit of youth, you're getting a little bit of talent, you're getting players that you want to develop under your own name. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you're getting still relatively youthful players, but do have a lot of experience. So seeing this age range is probably not a surprise. With more experience comes in more money, so unsurprisingly, that category does have a fair bit more spending on it. Overall, in total, 2.9 out of 3.3 seems very, very fair and very consistent with how the game should be moving. Looking at the distribution of contract durations, it might be surprising to see that the majority of contracts are actually less than a year. 2022 did also see the highest ever share of contracts with a duration more than 2 years. So whatever you see here over the 2-year period is the highest we've ever seen it, which means we are moving in the right direction of offering slightly longer contracts. Contract durations has been very vague in the women's game. This particularly annoys journalists and fans. You don't get to know when the player's contract is up until somehow they renew one summer. It's very hush-hush under the table. If you're not really engraved in that fan base, you're probably not going to know what the player's contract length is for. Now, lastly, looking at nationalities by the number of transfers, the US, again, unsurprisingly, number one in the list. This can be attributed to how big of a pool of players they have all across the world. I mean, any league you look into, either amateur, half professional, whatever it may be, likely they do have a bunch of American players there. And then obviously the NWSL, predominantly the league does have more American players than any other nationality. How they do trades and kind of deals between clubs does allow a very ongoing influx of players moving in and out very, very frequently. Brazilian players also seeing a significant increase, considering they did just win the Copa America. British players, a significant increase in interest in the Scottish League as well as the WSL, so that is no surprise there, with a lot of youth academy players finding professional contracts. For the first time, USA does rank second in the players outgoing, which is kind of really interesting. This is a topic that I did talk about in my previous video comparing the NWSL and some of the major European leagues. This is a trend that we have been seeing over the last few years, with a lot of American players leaving the US and specifically the collegiate system, going straight to Europe right after looking for a professional contract. Right behind Spain, Sweden also has the second highest amount of incoming players into that Swedish league that has consistently been one of the best in the world. Interestingly, players moving from Kenya to a new club in Tanzania represented the largest transfer stream between any two associations. This is actually the first time that any African association has appeared among the top transfer streams, so let alone the fact that we saw two in the top. Young African Sports Club here ranking second, having 16 incoming players, is not a surprise. This club has been consistently getting great backup and funding from the men's side. They were runner-ups for the first time in the league in the 2021-2022 Tanzanian league, so being able to finish up second, start getting that really important funding from the men's team will obviously push players in Africa, specifically places like Kenya, to start moving into Tanzanian clubs. Vllaznia being the first ever Albanian team, men or women, to qualify for a Champions League spot, ranking fourth here does make a lot of sense. That is a massive achievement in any European club that will ultimately attract players, and a few American players as well. That does talk about our conversation earlier here, from players leaving the US to go and pursue other aspirations in Europe. Majority of these clubs do kind of let go and bring in around 1 to 5 transfers. It is very, very, in fact, extremely rare to see a club let go of 6 to 10 transfers. This is what we see in the green bar here. Most clubs do typically engage in no more than 5 players joining in their squad in a single year. FIFA releases one of these incredible reports every single year that talks about amateur and professional football, both from the men's and the women's side. This year, it did have a fair more kind of detail and significant increases in pretty much every positive category. Higher numbers of transfers, higher numbers of movement, a higher number of associations involved, a higher number of clubs going professional. We saw clubs break attendance records. That is obviously match day revenue that broke record. Majority of these clubs are seeing revenue they've never seen before, and this all kind of ties together when you have a cycle of money influx, ingoing and outgoing in a club, between clubs, put fans aside. Between clubs, that's exactly what the game needs. This is a very positive trend to where the game is going, and I would love to hear your opinions on some of these statistics and trends that FIFA was able to reveal to us this year. Again, to stay updated and to continue enjoying the beautiful game, make sure you subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me on Twitter. Now, I will see you later.